Welcome to the TOEIC TOEFL IBT Independent Writing Tasks, Day 3, Part 2. Our objectives for Part 2 are: take a moment to review again where we are in the writing process, and spend a moment looking at topic sentences. Then we will begin discussing writing the body, specifically looking at how we need to connect back to Part 1 of the writing process, which is planning to write. We will then participate in a little activity that we call What's the Point? And then begin discussing a very important idea when it comes to writing the body, and that is involving paragraph development. Especially looking at the general organization that we will be recommending for use on the TOEIC and TOEFL. And then finally, you'll begin your homework activity called Developing the Paragraph. So again, in the writing process, we've reviewed so far the planning stage, where we think about brainstorming ideas to include in our essay, writing the introduction, including developing a hook and writing a thesis, and then in our previous video we began discussing the importance of writing topic sentences. So again, topic sentences can be tricky. Certainly we need to recognize that topic sentences are essential to how we organize the writing tasks, and of course the essay when we get to the university as well. So as we mentioned in our previous video, they're part of sort of the nerve system of how we connect the thesis to the ideas that we're writing about in the essay. So consider this part of the spine, which we're referring to as the body. So again, as you notice here in the introduction, and the thesis make up sort of part of the brain, sort of where the activity itself kind of gets us started. And then the spinal cord is sort of connected to the brain. This is what we refer to as the body. So again, in our visual example, think of the topic sentences as sort of introducing us to the individual nerves that we might see that we're going to be addressing throughout the essay. And again, I hope these visual ideas kind of give you some basic idea of why we refer to this part of the essay as the body. Certainly we could use other visual images, but I think in this way you can see how everything is sort of connected together. Now certainly one way we connect these ideas is focusing on the signal or transition words that we're going to use. And signal words are going to be very important. These are things especially that the raters for the test, when they read your essays, these are some of the things they look for to indicate that you understand structure. So we're going to take some of the ideas we've discussed earlier and kind of put them in the context of the three different essay types: defense, comparison, and explanatory. And you will see that each one kind of generally lends themselves to certain signals or transitions more than others. For example, in the defense essay, you might see more ideas involving signals of sequence or signals of continuation. Explanatory essays may also include these things, and even perhaps using example signals as well. Of course, comparison essays will probably use things like change of direction or signals that we refer to as compare or contrast. And then, of course, there are additional signals that aren't necessarily specific to any topic, but may be helpful, especially ones that maybe indicate cause and effect. So let's go ahead and look at an example. First, starting with an explanatory essay. What do you consider to be the most important room in a house? Why is this room more important to you than any other room? Use specific reasons and examples to support your opinion. Again, I'm not trying to write an entire essay here, but just kind of give us a small sample so that we can see how this information connects. So let's look at my introduction. First, my hook. It is always said that a house is not a home until you've had your first housewarming party. In many cultures, this tradition almost always involves music, perhaps dancing, wine, but most certainly food. This, along with other reasons, is why I think the kitchen is the most important room in the house. So notice how in my first paragraph, Since this is an explanatory essay, I use kind of a sequence word, such as one or one reason. This kind of gives the idea that you're expecting something else to follow. So again, one reason I choose the kitchen is because of its central importance in housing and storing food. So I'm going to explain more in this particular paragraph why food is such an important role in the family and, of course, in our lives. Another reason for choosing the kitchen involves its place as the gathering place for the whole family, especially at mealtimes. So notice how I've highlighted the word reason to connect back to the thesis, and that I've used words such as one and another to give the idea that we're kind of following a series of steps. Now, of course, this isn't exactly a sequence per se. It's kind of a dividing from one idea to the next idea. But I use words that are very similar to sequences, one and the other, to give an idea that we're expecting something else to come. So notice how these two particular paragraphs will connect to each other, and how they will also connect back to the thesis using the word reasons. Now let's look at a comparison essay. Some people choose friends who are different from themselves. Others choose friends who are similar. Compare the advantages of having friends who are different with the advantages of having friends who are similar. What kind of friend do you prefer? So let's take a look. Again, this time I start with a hook that's more personal. When I was in high school, I had the chance to take many different classes, both college preparatory and vocational. Not only did these courses help broaden my mind, but they also introduced me to many people I never would have met if I had chosen to stay on the university track. Both of these experiences gave me the opportunity to compare the advantages of having friends similar to me with the advantages of having friends who were different from me. So again, notice I managed to include the fact that the topic itself requires me to compare advantages. So I include those actual words in my thesis. Now notice how I introduce each idea in the body. The first focusing on the advantages of having friends who are similar. The next one I use a contrast word to indicate that I'm moving on to a different idea, one that's the opposite. So I use a phrase such as on the other hand. And notice how, again, these ideas connect back to similar language that we see in the thesis. Using general words such as advantages helps in a way to, again, provide that kind of consistent structure that we need when we're writing an essay. So again, topic sentences connect back to the thesis using similar language. So again, general words that we talked about in previous videos, words such as reason or reasons, advantages, and so on. And one way to think about topic sentences is they kind of serve as a mini introduction for each body paragraph and prepare us for what we're to read next. And using good signal words and transitions will show us how they connect to the thesis, but also how each body paragraph will connect to each other. And that's often very important. Now, as we continue on in developing our body, it's probably a good idea to go back and think for a moment as to the actual reasons we're thinking of including in our essay. Now, of course, this is always important. We should always be thinking about the reasons we generated in step 1, but sometimes it might be helpful for us to go back and review how exactly we're going to connect reasons from our planning stage to actually developing our essay. So again, after we begin developing the introduction, we oftentimes need to think about, well, what personal examples and experiences do I wish to focus on? Perhaps I had too many, or perhaps not enough. So the first thing we need to remind ourselves is generally for the TOEIC or TOEFL, you only need about 2 or 3 reasons to include in the writing task. Again, if you recall in a standard college essay, it's generally around 3 or perhaps even 4. And part of this process, when you're trying to select which reasons to write about, of course there are many things that can factor in, but I find it's helpful to think about which experiences do we consider to be the most relevant. Relevant meaning which ones pertains and relates to it in a most immediate way. Of course, another thing they're looking for on the TOEIC and TOEFL is how we can connect many of these issues to larger issues that we see in life. So again, let's look at our original example from several videos before, talking about team sports or individual sports. So if you recall in our planning stage, we did kind of some concept mapping. Of course, we didn't focus on a sport per se. We focused on an academic team. But again, the idea was very similar. And some of the ideas we came up with were the fact that being on a team helped provide kind of a balance of strengths and weaknesses. So you didn't necessarily had to be able to do everything because others may have strengths to help balance it out. Of course, other things we said about team sports is that you meet people of similar interests, meaning, of course, you can also learn from other people. They have something to teach or share with you. And something I didn't mention before, but I think is equally important, is the value of humility. And humility is sort of that ability to realize that you don't know everything. So it kind of teaches us how to be respectful and appreciative when somebody has something to share with us. And of course, being on a team, certainly, having people who have strengths certainly can show us when we need to listen because they have something to share with us. Now, in my particular essay, I'm focusing on these two reasons. And of course, all of these reasons might be good, but I'm going to kind of discuss for a moment why I think that they're relevant and how they can help connect to something a little bit bigger. So to me, these seem most relevant because they seem to be directly the products of working on a team. Whereas I believe that you can also learn from other people, not necessarily on a team. So in my essay here, I believe that you could find the other choices in other situations, but that those two choices to me, and again this is just me in my opinion, seem to be kind of the products of working on a team. But then notice how they'll also give me the opportunity to connect to something larger in life. And again, I also think this is what the TOEIC and TOEFL, this is what they're looking for. So before we do that, though, I think it's a good time to play an activity that I'm going to call What's the Point? So how do we play? Well, again, part of the idea is we need to see topics and kind of make some decisions as to how, when we plan for these topics, which points do we think are relevant. So in this particular game, we're going to see 3 topics, one from each essay type. And then I'm going to include about 3 to 4 reasons or examples that I kind of planned for when I began thinking about these topics. What I want you to do is to decide which 2 of these reasons do you think are the most relevant to the topic itself. Now for each one, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look at my choices and to listen to my argument, and then basically see if you can choose which 2 do you think may be the most relevant. And we'll see if you agree with me. So are we ready? Alright, well let's begin. So here's our first idea. So here's the topic. First, a defense essay. It is better for children to grow up in the countryside than in the big city. Do you agree or disagree? Use specific reasons and examples to develop your essay. So I'm going to choose the countryside. And here are my reasons. Now in 30 seconds I'm going to explain these reasons, and then I want you to see if you can identify which ones do you think might be the most relevant, and see if you agree with me. So here we go. Ready? Let's begin. So I believe that the countryside helps provide a strong connection to nature, which is often very important because when we live in the city, we often don't get to feel the breeze blowing through our hair or the trees and feel kind of the effects of nature on us, which I think also leads to another important idea of peaceful living. And of course, when we live peacefully, this can kind of provide a life that's perhaps freer of distractions, no noise or pollution or any of those kinds of things. Okay, so which reasons do you think might be the most relevant? Well, I'm going to say that I believe that the free of distractions reason makes a lot of sense to me. Part of the idea is being in the countryside is something that we generally don't associate with pollution or noise of traffic, so I'm going to include this idea of free of distractions. Of course, what's also directly relevant to the countryside is being connected to nature. Clearly, when we live in the countryside, we get a better chance to see nature around us, trees and flowers and so on. Now, of course, you might think that peaceful living is somewhat connected to these free of distractions, which I think is probably pretty good. But when I mean free of distractions, I kind of mean also like pollution and those kinds of things. So to me, I kind of believe that these two might have the better connection to a broader area, kind of broader life issues. But again, you may disagree. All right, let's play again. This time, let's look at an explanatory essay. Nowadays, food has become easier to prepare. Has this change improved the way people live? Use specific reasons and examples to support your answer. Okay? So again, this way we have to explain, has the change improved the way people live? And I'm going to say that it has improved. So here are my reasons. I've got 30 seconds. I'm going to explain them and see if you agree with me which two might be the best to choose. So ready? Let's begin. Well, first off, I'd say that part of the idea of improving food quality is that food gets to keep fresher longer. Packaging has improved, so that's one of the benefits. Of course, another benefit is that it also has led to more food shipment. So now we can ship foods from different countries to more places, and therefore we can get more access to different kinds of foods. Of course, thanks to this packaging, it also takes less time to prepare, which frees up more time in our lives to do other things. Okay, so which two do you think might lead to better discussion and perhaps directly involve kind of improving the quality of our lives? Well, as much as less time to prepare might prepare us to do other things, I don't know necessarily that would be just a direct result of food preparation. So I'm probably going to focus more in this case on the ones that actually talk about the quality of food and how it might directly affect our lives. So in this case, I'm probably going to focus on the two that have to do with kind of the packaging aspect, and that the packaging itself leads to greater advantages when it comes to food and food availability. Of course, again, you might disagree, but these are the two that I'm probably going to choose if I were going to write this essay. Okay, let's look at our final topic, a comparison essay. It's generally agreed that society benefits from the work of its members. So we're going to compare the contributions of artists to society with the contributions of scientists to society. Which type of contribution do you think is valued more, and give specific reasons to support your answer? Now I'm just going to focus on the actual contributions themselves. So first we're going to start off with the contributions of artists. So again, we're going to have 30 seconds, and then let's see if you agree, and then perhaps choose the same ones, the same contributions. So here we go. Ready? Let's begin. I do believe that artists give us a better understanding of the human condition, so that way we can kind of better understand our own feelings and the problems that the world may have. Of course, art also brings peace to our lives, and kind of like with music, for example, it helps kind of remove the distractions and difficult things that we might share. Art also helps expand our horizons and sees things in a different way. Of course, finally, I think art always helps us appreciate what's beautiful in life, and that's important. Okay, I had 4 reasons this time, so which ones do you think might give me a better opportunity to expand? Well, certainly one thing I could say, I want to go for answer choices that seem a little deeper. Part of the problem with choosing artists is that artists may seem like they're not as important as scientists. So in this case, I'm probably going to stick with the ideas that help show how artists help me improve my thinking about the world. So in this case, I'm probably going to choose these 2 reasons because I think they might be a little more serious when compared to the choices that scientists are probably going to be presented with. Of course, bringing peace to our lives and appreciation of beauty is important, but I'm probably going to choose these because I think they might connect a little bit better and also give stronger arguments when compared to the scientist one. Okay, well now let's move on to the scientists. Okay, so first off I need to see if I can remove, well I'm going to use a different pen color. Okay, but first off let's go ahead and 30 seconds on the clock and let's go. So one thing that scientists do is they basically have improved the quality of our lives. Certainly we live longer, and that's directly a result of what science has been able to do. Science has provided improved medicine, which keeps us healthier longer and helps us fight against diseases that long ago would have killed us, which of course leads to a longer life as well. Science has also provided a lot of technological innovations. Computers, for example, and cars and so on help make the quality of our lives better too. Now, of course, the difficulty here is it really looks like there are a lot of good things that science and scientists contribute. So we have to be careful to make sure we give it an even balance. So that's why we're just going to focus on two here. I think certainly one thing we need to stress is the fact that science in general has improved the quality of our lives. So I'm going to circle this one here. Now, as you could probably think, the improved quality of life certainly could connect to improved medicine and to longer life. So we could probably incorporate these ideas under the same category. So in this case, I think I'll go ahead and choose the technological innovations as well, because in a way they've also helped improve the quality, not just in terms of living longer and healthier, but in terms of enabling us to do more. So again, the computer, for example, has certainly made life a lot easier compared to, say, typewriters. So in this way I could combine some ideas, but I think clearly these are the two reasons I'm going to choose. So, did you agree with me on every choice? Well, don't worry. If you didn't, certainly we can realize that being relevant is probably going to depend a lot on the person who's making the selection. So keep in mind, there are no right or wrong choices, but I always want to encourage you, when you think of reasons, make sure they are relevant. And again, make sure they can give you the opportunity to expand, because that's the idea. We want to choose reasons that give you enough opportunity to develop something interesting, and of course ones that you can connect to personally. So I think about the science and art, kind of situation. I don't necessarily consider myself a scientist or an artist, but I can certainly say that I like to do some creative things in my life, but then I also enjoy the benefits of the technological innovations that science has provided. So there, I've already found a way to connect to them personally. Okay, so as we move on, now we start getting into talking about a paragraph in general. Now notice I'm not focusing so much on the introduction. As I said at the first set of videos, the introduction is usually not the most important part of the TOEIC and TOEFL. Of course, again, introductions are important. But what I want us to think about first is just the general idea of what a paragraph is. Well, according to Anne Hogue, who's the author of a very good book called The Essentials of English, a writer's handbook, and this is a book that we've used in our writing classes before in our program, she defines a paragraph as a group of related sentences that discuss one, and usually one, main idea. So the idea here is that this paragraph kind of revolves around the central idea that you're trying to make in that paragraph. Now, a paragraph can be perhaps as few as, 3 sentences, which I find probably on the TOEIC or TOEFL is going to be too short. And of course, paragraphs can be as long as even 10 to 15 sentences, and perhaps even longer. But again, I think that's probably too long. So you're probably going to be looking for coming up with a paragraph length that's somewhere in the middle. Now, if you recall in our TOEIC TOEFL essay format, the body itself usually contains about 2 to 3 reasons. Now let's look even more specifically at each particular paragraph. So again, thinking about, for example, reason number 1, if we try to just isolate a paragraph, notice how the general organization, well, we can kind of start with the idea that we know the first sentence is going to be called the topic sentence. But believe it or not, if the topic sentence is like the mini introduction to the paragraph, each paragraph in the body probably also needs to include a mini conclusion. And you'll see an example of that as we move on in this video. Now, there are many different ways that you can organize a paragraph when it comes to writing. It will all really depend on the type of writing that you're doing. Now, on the TOEIC or TOEFL, since, again, most of the essays tend to be defense or explanatory, I'm going to show you a very common TOEIC or TOEFL paragraph organization that might be helpful for you to kind of borrow when you're writing on the TOEIC or TOEFL. So first off, we said that it begins with the topic sentence. That's always important. And of course, a topic sentence could be more than one sentence. The next idea is to go ahead and jump into your personal example. That is, if you're going to include a personal example. And of course, when we include a personal example, we probably need to give some details about that example. Next, we're going to try to connect it to the main reason we're trying to make in the paragraph. And again, the main reason also will need some supporting details. And then finally, we will arrive at the conclusion of the paragraph. And that way it'll give a sense of closure when we're ready to move on to the next paragraph. So here, as you can see, there are four kind of ideas that I want you to think about. So there's a topic sentence, then we kind of connect to our personal example and include some details about it. Next, we connect to the main reason we're trying to make, and then finally we conclude with a conclusion. And this is kind of the way we progress as we read through the paragraph. So we have to remember that that's kind of from the beginning to the end. Now, I'm going to go back to that earlier essay we were starting and we talked about, the one involving team sports. So again, I've written the topic sentences for the body, and I've chosen, again, the value of teamwork and how that's going to connect to the balance of strengths and weaknesses. And the second one involves the value of humility. But I'm only going to start with the first one here in this video. So watch what happens when I start developing this paragraph, beginning with the topic sentence. Now notice how I go ahead and begin to include my personal example. As the point guard on the team, I had to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different players on the team. I had to know when to pass the ball and help set up my teammates to give us an advantage when we needed to score. And even sometimes I would need to know when to take the ball and score on my own. So in this case, I included a personal example. And notice that in the example, I included some details about it. So not only did I just say that I was the point guard and I had to understand these strengths and weaknesses, I explained a little bit more about what that means. I included some more details. So again, in basketball, a point guard is the person who kind of sets up or kind of helps out the other teammates, mainly kind of handling the basketball and knowing when to pass and when to shoot. So in this way, I provided a personal example that talks a little bit about that idea of teamwork and knowing that in teamwork it involves strengths and weaknesses. Now watch how I tried to connect it to my main reason next. This is very much like what happens in real life. Teamwork is very important once you enter the real world of work. In most businesses and organizations, working with other people on a team is often a job requirement. In order to function well on a team, you have to know what the strengths and members are of the members on the team, and even of yourself. So notice in the first sentence, this is how I try to make a connection to the main reason, which of course the main reason is not about basketball, it's more about the real world. Because that's what teamwork is supposed to do. It's teaching us the value of that so that we use it in our real lives. Then I spend some time getting into the supporting details. Well, what exactly do I mean in the real world? Well, I detail the fact that teamwork is something that you have to do in most businesses. And like we said, it's often a requirement at these particular businesses and organizations. So in this way, I try to make a connection of the strengths and weaknesses argument that I mentioned that I used in my sporting experience. Of course, the paragraph needs something to help wrap it up or conclude. So notice what I did is I connected the team sport idea to the idea of teamwork in real life. So playing on a team sport helped prepare me for this valuable skill I would need later in life. So in this way, the conclusion kind of revisits the topic sentence, but then also finds a way to connect my personal example back to my real main reasons. Now, of course, this is not exactly a paragraph yet. What I did is I kind of broke it down so that we could see the different elements being used in the paragraph. So again, the first thing we have to recall that in terms of the actual style of the paragraph, we need to indent the topic sentence, which you can do when you put your cursor at the very first word, which in this case is the. We hit the tab key to indent, and generally it takes a few spaces, perhaps 5, 6, or so on. So again, this is called an indentation, and this is something we should always do when we're starting a new paragraph. Next, of course, we want to make sure we bring all of the sentences together to form a unified paragraph appearance. We want them to look like they all belong to the same paragraph. So we don't want any big spaces in between our sentences. Now, you look at this paragraph and say, it's pretty long. And of course, on the TOEIC or TOEFL, we don't want our paragraphs to be too long. So in this case, you might want to think about breaking it into two separate paragraphs. Now, the question is, where would you do it? Well, one place you could do it is probably where you're connecting it to real life. And notice that even though I don't include a direct signal word, I do mention the concept of as well, which is again kind of connecting to the idea. The concept is I'm switching from sports to real life. So that word as well, which I guess you could call a clear signal, helps connect the two paragraphs together and to see that we're still kind of talking about the same idea. So we want to make sure that we kind of highlight that. So it kind of shows how we're connecting to the paragraph before, but we haven't changed directions yet. Part of the idea is I started my original idea with the first lesson. So in this case, we know that this next paragraph is not the next lesson. It's part of the same lesson that I'm explaining before. And that's all due to the fact that I used a signal here, such as well. Which, again, you could kind of refer to as a continuation, kind of developing the idea. So what have we learned so far? Well, again, it's important to recognize that a paragraph needs to follow a logical progression of ideas. Though there are many organizational patterns that you will need to learn in writing different types of essays, the one that I've presented here works well for most of the personal essays that you'll see in the TOEIC or TOEFL. Now, of course, we will explore more about comparison essays in a later video. And remember, I do think it's important to use personal examples wherever possible. But it's also important to connect to the main reason you're trying to make. So again, anytime you use something personal, a personal example or some sort of personal experience, don't forget to actually connect it to the main reason you're trying to make. And most likely think about how it's going to relate to any larger life issues. And of course, we also see the importance of signal words and transitions. Because, again, in the topic sentences, they help connect to the thesis, but they're also important throughout the entire paragraph. In future videos, we're going to see how this helps the essays flow together and provide concepts that we refer to as cohesion and unity, which, again, we'll be explaining and exploring these ideas in the future. Well, now it's time for you to do some work. Click below for the homework activity, Developing the Paragraph. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.